My name is Denise Carew. I'm from CITL, and my job here today is just to introduce you all. So we have Stephanie Blandford, leading Power and Cheryll.
Cheryll couldn't make it. She's on a plane to New Brunswick to Science Atlantic.
Oh, okay. And so you guys are, your topic is chicken or beef, self-selecting course evaluation in large enrollment classes.
Yeah.
Okay, so over to you guys.
Cool. So, as just introduced, we were really interested in the integration of choice into classroom evaluation schemes for several reasons that we're going to get into. But largely, we're kind of just going to spend some time talking about self-motivation and motivation in general. What is it and why do we care about motivation as post-secondary educators? We'll look into a theoretical framework, the self-determination theory, that we in psychology, and Cheryll and I, really subscribe to when we're thinking about how to adjust our evaluations and adjust our classrooms in order to promote motivation. And we'll talk a little bit about the work that led up to the current study that Stephen really has been spearheading along with Cheryll and myself. So kind of the big overarching picture, especially when we're considering large enrollment classes, which tend to be those first year classes, are the why are you here piece for me. So why university? Why are students choosing to go to university? And while this data comes out of the US, and it's a bit dated as of now, but an Educational Foundation study found that when they looked at responses from over 200,000 students, that by and large, the majority of students are going to university for either job or work outcomes, or because of family or social pressure. So 75% responded that these were the reasons why they're going to university. Whereas 20% of students reported that they were going to university or they chose to go to university because they wanted to learn, because they were interested in subject matter, they just wanted to learn things. So the reality here is that most of our students are here because they see a benefit to being here, which is kind of not a recent shift, but a shift in what university was originally for, right? We think of being institutes of higher learning, and back when they weren't accessible to everybody, it was really to just pursue knowledge and just to learn. And we're now seeing that shift in that the modern university student is here because they see a benefit to being here. So in terms of self-motivation, there are certain things that we know about self-motivation in the context of education. So first and foremost, that self-motivation is valued, right? Our society values people who have motivation. Why? Because motivation gets results. When you're motivated to do things, you actually go out and do things and you have results to show that you've done that. Our society values productivity and values those results. We also know that in classroom settings, a major barrier to success in an educational environment is conscientiousness. So if you are paying attention to the tasks that you are being given, you're more likely to succeed on those tasks because you're reading the fine print. You're making sure you've answered the question to its full potential. You make sure that you include all of the knowledge that you have on that particular environment. And studies have also shown that individuals who have high levels of self-motivation actually are protected against these negative effects associated with low conscientiousness in general. So if you have high motivation, you're still likely to succeed in post-secondary education, regardless of whether you have that conscientiousness factor in your personality. And we've also seen in the literature that there's a positive relationship between self-motivation and general success in academia and in university settings. So self-determination theory here is our theoretical framework that helps us understand motivation, personality, development, and wellness. Central to self-determination theory really, though, is the assumption that humans strive for growth, right? One of the central assumptions that self-determination theory posits is that humans want to learn things. And that's their kind of general natural tendency. But that motivation does still play a very big role. And not only just motivation, but internal motivations. So sources of motivations that come from our own thoughts and feelings, rather than having an external piece to it, some sort of value attached to it. So self-determination, or motivation, according to self-determination theory, lies on this continuum, where on the one end over here, we have completely amotivated people. So these are people who are not motivated by any factor to do a certain behavior, therefore they do not do it. There's extrinsic motivation, which is where individuals will engage in a behavior. They're motivated to complete a behavior simply because they see a value to it, right? So if we're going back to that why are students in university, that piece here is that work outcome. There's that benefit. I want to be a social worker. To be a social worker, I have to go to university, so I'm going to university. And then on the complete other end of the continuum here, we have intrinsic motivation. So that's that motivation that is purely driven by one's own thoughts and feelings, right? I want to be here because I want to learn. I want to gain knowledge. Extrinsic motivation is also separated into 4 distinct subcategories as well. Lies on its own sort of mini continuum within this. And that it's classified here based on where those sources of regulation come from. So what sort of value is attached and where that value stems from. External regulation is the possibility of a reward or a punishment. So someone is engaging in that specific behavior simply to either gain a reward or avoid a punishment. So for example, a student coming to university because their parents threatened to cut support, right? You can't live at home unless you go to university, right? That's something that we see quite often. There's introjected regulation, which is when that value is attached through one's ego or self-reward and self-punishment. So this is where that reward punishment piece is not coming from an external source, rather than something that the student themselves has internalized a little bit. So maybe things like one's sense of self-worth or their worth to their family is tied to having a university education to some degree. Identified regulation is when that source of value comes from a sense of personal importance. So we're now starting to feel like getting an education is part of one's identity. It's part of one's value to oneself. And then finally, right before we get to intrinsic motivation, we have integrated regulation, which is very, very similar to intrinsic motivation, but there is still that attachment of reward to it. So remember how I told you that 20% of university students are at university because they want to gain knowledge, they want to learn? When you actually dig into their survey and interview responses in the free text forms, most of them are actually exhibiting integrated regulation as opposed to true intrinsic motivation, right? At the end of the day, that degree gets them further in life. And a lot of scholars, Cheryl included and myself getting there, believe that integrated regulation is the best that we can hope for our university students, because at the end of the day, there is a value to that degree that we give to our students at the end of their time with us. Self-determination theory also posits that we can change motivation. So we can move somebody from amotivated and external sources of motivation to more internally regulated sources of motivation. And we do this by satisfying their basic psychological needs. And these basic psychological needs are competence, so feeling like we are good at what we're doing and that we're mastering the skills. Autonomy, feeling that we have choice, feeling that we have control over what we're learning, when and why. Relatedness, feeling connected to our peers and connected to the community that we are a part of. So these 3 basic psychological needs are the foundation of how we can move motivation towards that internal source of the continuum. And there's additional literature that suggests, specifically in educational settings and in classroom settings, that novelty also plays a huge role, right? So what we're teaching, what we're presenting is new. So just in graphical form here, if our basic psychological needs are not satisfied by a particular behavior or environment, we're not likely to engage in that behavior. But if our needs are fully satisfied, then we're leaning more towards that intrinsic motivation piece. So Cheryl, who couldn't be here, and performer honors student Madison Riggs last year presented a poster at this conference looking at what happens when we give students choice. So Cheryl teaches a larger enrollment, non-major, so elective level course, the Psychology of Abnormal Behavior, Psychology 3640. It actually is required for some programs. Some HKR groups do have it as, like major programs do have it as a requirement. And it is a possibility to use as a minor requirement for psych minor students. But it's not a requirement. And in fact, psychology major students often can't use it for credit because it is credit restricted with our majors abnormal psychology course right now. So largely students in that class are there because they're interested in this subject matter. But essentially what she did is she gave students 3 different grading paths. Either they were only graded based on exams and quizzes, only exams and quizzes and a few mini activities that she would do in class with them, or exams, quizzes, mini activities, and larger writing assignments. So how much labor you were willing to put into your course material, how much you were willing to sort of produce, reduce the weight of your exams, essentially. So exams only is going to be, you know, your classic midterm and final exam, large weighted, both of them. But if you added more work, your exams were worth less. So those kind of one day risk of having a bad day were lower. It's important to note that not everybody chose the more labor approach. Not everybody chose even the middle approach. There was still a significant number of students that chose the exams only, right? And our students are here for lots of different reasons, and they're enrolled in certain classes for lots of different reasons. It might be required, it might not be required. So these were things that were all sort of considered. And so what they did is they were really looking to understand whether satisfying basic psychological needs, because giving students these choices really was set up in order to satisfy students' psychological needs. It allowed them to feel autonomy, right? Giving them choice, having control. It allowed them to feel competent because they were likely going to be selecting grading paths that were based on their skill sets. If you know you test well, maybe exam only is the best way for you. If you know you don't test well, maybe adding in other opportunities to get course credit is better for you. And it also helped them with relatedness, right? So it helped them gain more peer and teacher relationships. It made them felt more supported. And a lot of the mini activities here were designed to be done in groups. So it allowed students opportunities to discuss amongst themselves. So they had a sample of 49 students who were enrolled in this class, and they took their grades in the class, and they had them fill out scales for the basic psychological needs generally, as well as in the classroom. So what they found actually is that while the basic psychological need of competence on the general scale only was positively correlated with individuals' grade in that class, it was predicted by their cumulative GPA. So in general, students who were more competent overall are getting better grades in this particular course. And interestingly, any of the other psychological needs were not a predictor of success in the course. And there was no difference of grading path selection on grade. So it didn't matter what grading path you chose, students performed on average about as well, regardless of what grading path they chose. Which was really interesting to us. We kind of thought, well, why wouldn't satisfying someone's basic psychological needs lead to a change in their performance? How did this? It doesn't really fit with the theory. Ultimately, though, every student enrolled in this class was given a choice, right? Every student had the opportunity to pick what was best for them. Not a single student was disadvantaged by giving a choice. So this brought us to Psych 1000 and 1001. Around the same time that Cheryl integrated these different grading schemes in 3640, she also did them in our introductory psychology classes, like 1000 and 1001, which are very large enrollment classes. They're capped at 300 and often offered around 5 times each per academic year. So this is what that grading scheme looked like, and a lot of other introductory psychology instructors have adopted this grading scheme, where we've got quizzes, midterm, and a final, non-cumulative final, and students could choose whether or not to participate in the in-class activities, which brought their exam weights down quite significantly, right, from 40% weighted to 30% weighted. Important to note, though, that not all instructors buy into this model, right? Not every Psychology 1000 and 1001 instructor feels that this is an important component of our classroom. So this resulted in some students getting a choice and some students not getting a choice. So we realized that this would probably be an ideal sample to look at whether choice was a big factor in this particular context. So with that, I will turn it over to Stephen, who will take you through what we are doing now. Do you want the mic?
I think I'm good.
Okay.
I don't speak nearly as loud as Stephanie does, so I'll just try my best. But so basically the study that I've been working on with Cheryl and Dr. Blandford for the last, I'd say like 4 months or so, basically we just want to increase our understanding of the impact and influence of satisfying these psychological needs in an academic context, in this case, undergraduate students. And then more specifically, we want to examine how satisfying these needs in introductory psychology, so Psych 1000, 1001, how that influences their grades, so how they perform in the course. So we also look at other factors. On that note of other factors, we have our research goals and hypotheses. So we have 1 research question and 2 hypotheses. So our first research question, my first time using this thing. So our first research question, we just want to examine the effect of being offered choice in the classroom and how that affects performance, but also the satisfaction of these psychological needs. In terms of what we hypothesize that individuals with the ability to self-select should report greater satisfaction of these needs in the classroom relative to those who did not get a choice. And a second hypothesis is sort of similar to the first one, is that if you do have the ability to self-select, you will report better performance in introductory psychology relative to your cumulative GPA. So you will outperform your cumulative GPA. So in terms of the methodology, we send out recruitment emails to students who enrolled in Psych 1000 or Psych 1001, because sometimes students do both. It's quite common for students to do both between fall 2022 and winter 2025. Now, we send out a lot of emails, probably in the ballpark of at least like a couple thousand. Stephanie mentioned it that in the academic year, typically 5 classes of Psych 1000 and Psych 1001 each, or not each, but combined are offered. So in total 10, I mean 300 students per class, a lot of students. And the way that we send out the emails is basically we just got a class list, and then we just put some information about the study in that email, and then students read it nonetheless. So when students read the email, they get a brief explanation of the experiment or of the research, and then a Qualtrics link. So the Qualtrics link, send them the Qualtrics, they read the informed consent. If students do provide consent, we get their Psych 1000, and again, maybe also the Psych 1001 grade, if they did both. The cumulative GPA, which we get from the registrar's office, and then the grading pass, which then we just got from their instructor. So at the time of data analysis, we had 117 participants. There's still some more trickling in. By the time of data analysis, we have 117. And then of those 117, those participants performed the 21-item basic psychological needs satisfaction scale, and then the 20-item basic psychological needs satisfaction classroom scale. So a bit more on those scales. As Stephanie mentioned earlier, as you might notice on slide 2, that in the classroom literature, or the literature showing novelty of the psychological need is becoming more important. At least that's what the literature says. So this scale right here, the basic psychological need classroom scales, measures the 3 core psychological needs plus novelty. 2 important things to note about the scale, because we did make a few small tweaks with it, is that firstly, we changed some wording. So as you can see here with relatedness, for example, it says, I feel very comfortable with my instructor. Originally, that said teacher. The reason why we changed that is the scale was made for elementary students. So in our opinion, it's more appropriate to use the word instructor with an undergraduate population than it is to say teacher. Another thing too with this scale is some questions were like double-barreled. So they asked 2 and 1, a bit problematic. So we kind of just took the 2 questions it was asking, made them separate. So in our scale, we used a slightly modified scale. It has a couple more questions than the original. And then in terms of the BPNG or the basic psychological needs general scale, that we pretty much left that untouched. That typically just has the 3 psychological needs, same questions. We didn't really change much. So in terms of the results or the preliminary results, we have a few small to like moderate effect sizes. For example, novelty on the classroom scale is pretty much approaching a moderate effect size. There's some significance too. So you see again with the BPNC novelty or the basic psychological need classroom scale, students who had the choice to self-select around, students who chose non-traditional grading paths or activities typically reported more novelty than those who did not choose the non-traditional grading paths. The students who chose just exams and 2 midterms and a final typically reported less novelty than those who chose the activities. Also, too, students who did choose the non-traditional grading paths or the activities typically reported close to significant. The p-value is almost there, but typically trending towards more competency as well. So those who chose the activities reported more competency, as well as in general, those students typically reported more competency as well. So onto some graphs. So right here we have the means for perception of classroom novelty. So on the y-axis, we have the mean of novelty. On the s-axis, we have the activities and no activities, or the green. It's significant, as you can see. There's likely some error bars here that just show standard error, but nonetheless, the p-value is 0.017, so significant. In terms of this one, it's pretty similar, just different numbers. So the y-axis is just competency mean. The x-axis is just the activities and no activities. Again, just mean for classroom competency. Again, it's not quite there, but it's definitely trending towards significance. And as we get more participants trickling in, the still responses coming, it is trending more towards that 0.05 or significant. So in terms of our discussion, students who did choose a non-traditional grading path typically did report higher novelty, and again, close with the competency part. And then there was a small effect size of competency, as novelty kind of had a really close to moderate effect size. In terms of both groups, typically they did report similar satisfaction of these needs. So autonomy, for example, both groups did report similar. As Stephanie mentioned, that's kind of makes sense because again, in terms of autonomy, for example, both groups did get a choice. You got to choose if you want to do the activities or not. Another thing I didn't mention, but I think it's important that in general, if you look at the psychological need outside the classroom or just in the day-to-day life or in the classroom, across each group, so non-traditional or traditional grading paths, both groups reported more satisfaction of these needs outside the classroom than inside the classroom across everyone. So I thought that was important to note. But in short, long story short, that participating in activities contributes to increased novelty and competency. I think that's one thing we got from this research. So I think that's all. I'll have one more slide, so future directions. So if you did notice, we didn't mention anything about cumulative GPA. The reason for that is, long story short, is it takes a lot of hoops with the registrar's office to get that. Even though we do have consent from the students, it's just a lot of hoops to jump through. We don't have that data yet.
See with convocation.
So we do hope to get that data soon. And in terms of our first hypotheses, we still have some responses trickling in. So at time of data analysis, because I did the data analysis, that's about like a month ago now, because that research didn't see it. We only had 117, but responses are still trickling in. That's data still has to be announced, so it has to be used. So we do expect maybe that, for example, 0.073 that you saw was competency, maybe might shift more towards significance. They shift the other way, but the trend is towards significance. So that's another thing you have to do. So that's the future directions of the study. And I think I'm not wrong. I think that's all. Thank you so much. I appreciate you listening. One online too.
We did manage to leave about 5 minutes for questions if anybody has anything.
I speak loud enough. Is that good?
Yeah.
Okay.
Do you have, you used to do your grading? Like, do you have teaching?
TAs.
Yeah.
Yeah. So the activities themselves are usually relatively short. So depending on the way, so each instructor does it like a little bit differently, but the way that I've done it is in the fall, my classes were Monday, Wednesday, Friday. So the last Friday of it, or the last class of every chapter, we had activities devoted to that chapter. A lot of them were self-reflection. There were some questions that were right or wrong answers. And for an enrollment of 200 or 250 or 300, I typically get about 1 TA per 50 students. And just to kind of spread out the labor in terms of time-wise, I'll assign 2 TAs to each activity, just like A to M, M to Z or whatever, and then they kind of flip-flop back and forth. So there's just like a schedule, and I did it all complicated that way. So yeah, TAs do it. I provide them with a key. But to be honest, for my activities and for Cheryl's as well, there's a lot of reflection. Because we did want to try, and especially kind of watching where students' browsers are going, we wanted to try to create activities that were relatively AI proof, right? That you wouldn't need AI because there's no right or wrong answer, or it's directly related to in class, right? What did we talk about in class? What does your textbook say? Those kinds of things. Yeah, and mine were worth about 3 points per chapter. And then I always dropped like the lowest 2 grades. So if a student missed, if they had a bad day or whatever, it rarely affected their score on the activities kind of overall.
In terms of the exams, thank you for your presentation. Were they all multiple choice exams, or
Yeah.
are there any short answers, long answers in those exams?
No.
In terms of selection.
Yeah, they're all multiple choice. And that's because with the enrollment that high and using TA resources for activities, correcting is hard. Time consuming. Yeah.
Thank you very much.
Okay, Peggy, Rauman, and Rauman. Yes. Devey-Burry. And you guys are from the Center of Nursing Studies?
No,
Not
no,
anymore.
no.
The Faculty of Nursing now.
Yes.
Okay, I was tricked. Not on purpose. And so what's your enhancing student success in pathophysiology quality improvement process? Working on quality improvement in a nursing course right now with somebody, so I'm going to be very attentive.
Excellent. I hope so. So thank you for the introduction, and I really appreciate everybody staying at the last session of the day, especially those online as well. My name is Peggy Rauman. I am at the Faculty of Nursing at Memorial now. I have a long history of teaching in the nursing program. I was at the Center for Nursing Studies from I can't even tell you, probably 9 or 10 years. I had a short stint at the College of Registered Nurses, Newfoundland and Labrador. I was there for five years. And now I am in a tenure track position with Faculty of Nursing at MUN.
So I'm Robin Devey-Burry. I'm an assistant professor in the Faculty of Nursing, joined MUN 4 years ago. Was a transplant from Ontario, and my program of research focuses on transition to practice, new graduates, and internationally educated nurses as well. So yes.
Yeah, so Robin kind of took me under her wing a little bit. She was my go-to person for research, and we have a lot of things in common. And she's a subject matter expert with respect to transition to practice. So I thought that we would make a good team, and we're like chalk and cheese sometimes, but it works really well. Yeah, it works really well together. So just for a quick overview of our presentation, it's not a research-based presentation, it's a quality improvement project. It's a quality improvement project for me because I need to improve my quality. We're going to go over a little bit of the context of why we came up with this project and why it's a quality improvement project. A little bit about our problem description and our available knowledge and just what brought us around to it. We'll look at what we're using to measure, some of our limitations, and our status on it and the next steps. So, as a new assistant professor at Memorial, I wanted to do the TESI program, the Teaching Enhancement Through Scholarly Inquiry. And so the Teaching and Learning Conference. And so I did that program. I went, it was over 6 weeks, I think it was, and we had like a number of classes. And the whole purpose of this TESI was to come up with something that was within the scholarship of teaching and learning to really dig into teaching your own teaching styles and then how it transpires and affects learning. So this was an idea that came from the TESI program. So this is going to be my final project for TESI. And I think it fits with the scholarship of teaching and learning. And I know that I'm using it as a quality improvement for my, for my classroom and to look at, what I'm using, but I'm focusing a lot on the survey we're using. I'm focusing a lot on what the students need from me. And I think that maybe in the future we'll look at if it worked or not with the outcomes. Oh. So our problem description, and everybody knows this, in Canada and across the globe, there is a massive, massive nursing shortage. It is expected to have a shortage of 117,000 nurses by 2030, and that was predicted before the COVID-19 pandemic. A lot, the Canadian Association of Schools of Nursing has expressed concerns that there's not going to be enough new graduates coming out of the nursing program to replace the ones that are going to be retiring or the ones that have moved on. And we actually need about an 8% increase in nursing graduates just to replace nursing losses. And so essentially we have this nursing shortage, and a lot of the activities that happened on the nursing shortage have been to recruit internationally educated nurses, and myself and Rauman are working on another project on that level as well. And then there was some stuff that come down from government. We increased our number of nursing seats, and I'll get into that in a little bit we have satellite sites now to increase our numbers. But we never really focused on the students and helping them get through the core courses that are needed to graduate from the program. So for us in this quality improvement project, we're just using the definition of attrition as those who started in the program to the ones that have graduated from the program. And the difference between that is the attrition rate. So we thought that given the current pressures of the nursing shortage, that it would be a good idea for us who teach nurses and try to get them to graduate to look into this. So like I said, there's been a lot of initiatives that have been focused on helping, alleviate the nursing shortage, particularly in Canada, Newfoundland, and Labrador. But to set the context, one of the things that MUN did was the opening of the satellite sites. So we increased our seats in the nursing program. It was for registered nurses and nurse practitioners. But then we thought, well, there are students in rural and remote areas, or Newfoundland and Labrador so broad that we offered the same program to be taught synchronously over the internet, but it's just the same classroom. So we have satellite sites, they're called. So we have Gander, Grand Falls, Windsor, and Happy Valley Goose Bay. And there's students in each of those sites. So they come into a classroom just like this one. And instead of having me up in front, I'm just this big floating head on this screen that teaches them in real time, just the same as I do with my in-class. The other thing at MUN is that I have an in-person class, I had a accelerated option, and they have a slightly different progression through the program. So I had one in-person class, plus an accelerated class, plus the 3 satellite sites. And it was my first time teaching pathophysiology, and it is only that cohort, the ones that I taught just for that specific year, to help me with my quality improvement. So the thing that got me, so I taught at these satellite sites, first time teaching, first time wrapping my head around pathophysiology again after that, not teaching for five years, was that I'm the same teacher. I have students in all of these sites. I'm using the same slides. I'm using the same PowerPoints. I have the same stories. I have the same accents on things that I, emphasize. But when I got I was just going to say about your multiple choice, we use Remark, do you? No? Yeah, basically, we call ours Remark, right? So it comes back with some statistics on it. So I had some Remark inconsistencies. So my site in Happy Valley Goose Bay and my site in Gander and Grand Falls Windsor and my accelerated option and my St. John's option, they have this like little summary of the questions that the students found hard or the questions that the students found easy. There was hardly any consistency. Strange, right? It's weird that same teacher, same slides, same tests. It's just that the sites didn't find the same questions easy or difficult. So I was like, why is that? Like, considering that everything else is so consistent. And I'm in a unique position because first time teacher, and I got all the sites for the full year. So they had the same person, same kind of tutoring, the same kind of remediation. So I wanted to look into that. So there's St. John's, Grand Falls, Windsor, Happy Valley, Goose Bay. Thank you to Rauman for putting the arrows. So that was pretty much the rationale or setting the context of why this whole quality improvement came on. Chessie, new patho teacher, Remark inconsistencies. So what's our available knowledge? Why patho? Well, essentially it's because it's the course that I was teaching. But when you looked into it a little bit more, pathophysiology sets the foundation for strong clinical reasoning, which translates into like those safe practices and good critical thinking. It is a very challenging course for a new faculty to teach. There's a lot of information. It's very complex. It's hard to teach. So it's a good thing to look into. And also research indicates that low grades in pathophysiology led to people or students feeling that they maybe couldn't pass it, and then it led to attrition rates or maybe dismissal from the program. So the other thing is with us, pathophysiology is a core course, so you need to have it, but where it's placed in the program, if you don't pass it, then you're out for a year. So you have to be out a whole year. A lot of students who are displaced for a full year might not come back. So it's a good course to work on a quality improvement project. I will tell you, however, that attrition rates, like I wanted to give you attrition rates from MUN faculty in nursing. It's almost impossible to do. There are so many alternate pathways that you can take. There's out-of-sequence students. There's students that can go to different sites. So a lot of people who did not succeed in pathophysiology still may graduate on time. So again, it's back to a quality improvement project for me. So our purpose was that's our purpose. I'm just trying to see where Robin's going to take over so I don't have to, yeah. Let me flick it over. So we wanted to identify student nursing's academic success in pathophysiology as taught by a new faculty member in our Bachelor of Science in Nursing program. And I really just wanted to keep it away from research using specific quality improvement language, which I might slip back into research language, forgive us if we do. But to identify factors that predict student successes in pathophysiology, to identify factors that predict failure in pathophysiology, and to use those findings to refine and develop and make innovative strategies for teaching strategies, and give resources to students that will support their, pathophysiology journey, their trajectory through pathophysiology. So Rauman is going to, this is another one of her mini expertise. She's going to get into why we chose to be a quality improvement project.
You're too kind. So hello. I think I'm going to stand over here because I can see better.
Okay.
My old eyes. Okay, so we've got there we go.
There you go.
Okay, so why a quality improvement project? Peggy has done a great job in reviewing the path to quality improvement, but I just wanted to highlight the differences because oftentimes I hear people using them sometimes interchangeably, but there is a big difference between the two. And so I just wanted to touch on the highest points or the key points here and how we came to the conclusion that this did indeed fit within the quality improvement category versus research. And so the first is the overarching purpose. As Peggy's already shared, this is not about generalizable knowledge, which is the purpose for research, versus a quality improvement. It's a very narrow scope. It's a very specific purpose for a very specific context. So it's not transferable or generalizable. In terms of the effect on practice, we know research results, sometimes it's a lengthy road in order to implement the results, although we wish it was quicker. In quality improvement, the purpose is to make that change right after or even within the project. In terms of participant benefits, in research, they may or may not receive a benefit from participation, whereas in quality improvement, the purpose is that the benefit is realized by the participants, in this case, students and you. and dissemination of results as well. With research, of course, the expectation is to publish, to present, however, and to fill a knowledge gap. But with quality improvement, that's not the primary focus. It's about sharing the results within the context of the quality improvement project. We can publish. There are quality improvement journals, which is great, and usually you need to have ethics exemption, which we received. But when sharing with a broader audience, it's not about generalizing or transferring of the results. It's about the process. So hence, here we are today with a proposal, transferring that, sharing that. So the framework we chose for this quality improvement project is Squire 2.0. It's usually, it's been used a lot in quality improvement. It has a wonderful structure to follow. And as you'll see, the titles of our slides align with Squire 2.0. So they don't follow that research language. It's about quality improvement. So we're sticking to those guidelines as best as we can. In terms of the measures, and it's just, I find it a strange fit, but that's the quality improvement language. How are we going to conduct this quality improvement project? Peggy found this wonderful survey, the Academic Success Inventory for College Student Survey, that is focused on capturing variables related to academic success. And so this was developed by Dr. Previtt in 2011. It is a validated and reliable tool. And does have demographic information embedded in that tool. I don't know if anyone's familiar with that tool, but we noted when we were reviewing it that some of the demographic questions, wording, the terminology didn't really align with our current thoughts or appropriate terminology. So PD reached out to Dr. Previtt, got permission to change some of those demographic terminology and questions. And so that was done to reflect current practices, current EDIAR frameworks. So
The other thing with the tool, it's 2011. It's very frank. So like it's got very frank language in it. Like they just ask questions that, as somebody who's in the profession of nursing, I might articulate it a little bit differently. So I kind of, I'm a little bit anxious about some of the questions that are being asked because it uses like frank words like partying for students. because it's looking at the mediating variables, so internal and external variables. It looks at like what your relationship status was during, did you actually open your textbook? Did you go to class? Did you party all the time? And it used like some statements like that. So that's causing me a little bit of anxiety, but we decided to keep those in there just because it is a validated tool.
And we did put a caveat in the explanation for it that this is the language set by the tool.
Yes.
So just to set the context for students, because we know many of our students work incredibly hard. They're working
Yes.
full-time jobs, have families, et cetera. So it's not that they're going out partying. They have other mitigating factors.
Yes.
If they're struggling in Path. So in terms of the context or the number of participants that are available to be involved in this quiz, 144 nursing students were in that cohort. So it's 1 year worth in 5 sites, as Peggy described, and taught by Peggy. So the invitation to participate will be sent out via Brightspace email because it's part of that course. They're familiar accessing that through the program, but also for the course itself. And then data collection and analysis, we're using Qualtrics, so easy access. And then the analysis will take place in SPSS using appropriate statistical analysis.
Same thing you guys did. We put in the, in the email, what it was all about, and then the QR code to Qualtrics.
So it looks, at that stage, looks very similar to the research process, but it's quality improvement. So again, quality improvement looks at limitations as well, very similar. In terms of participation, students' availability might be a challenge, especially when launching the quality improvement project, time of year, that sort of thing might be a challenge. We've run into a few challenges and hurdles in terms of getting approvals, going back and forth. Some people said, no, this is a research study. No, this is a quality improvement. And so that back and forth, we had the form, we had the checklist. This is exactly what, just as we've shared. So eventually we got the stamp of approval. Yes, it's a quality project. So away we go.
Yes.
Yay. Also, of course, this is talking about students' success or challenges. And so some may be hesitant to reflect on some of those negative experiences. Similarly, they might be difficult to reach those who were unsuccessful due to not maybe checking their email or perhaps left the program altogether. So the length of the tool, though, to mitigate some of the factors in terms of participation, the length of the tool was selected to minimize the burden on students because we try our best to fill out surveys, but we know ourselves even the length of the tool plays a factor. And of course, we let them know that it's voluntary participation. So our outcomes, so hopefully we'll, through the use of the academic success inventory for college students, they get the results. So they will be able to look at the scale and then see where they fall on the scale. Say, okay, well, I was highly anxious at this moment in time, or I had a lot of family responsibilities, or maybe I did stay up too late before an exam. Maybe I just didn't like Peggy. That's one of the questions on there. So they'll get awareness of those factors that have influenced their success, because sometimes you don't really know what you don't know. And I will be able to use that data for refinement of my teaching strategies and hopefully help them develop some learning strategies and some development of innovative approaches to not only teaching and learning strategies, but maybe put supports in place in the classroom. And like you said, like maybe some self-selection of assessment material, anything goes. So I'm looking forward to those results. See what they say. So in terms of dissemination.
So teaching and learning conference, hi. This is just the proposal. We had to jump through hoops to get this going. It had to go through an executive committee in MUNTLC. I had to put it in through the for Qualtrics approval, for Qualtrics, I asked, I didn't need approval, and then I had to go through ethics, and then there was some of that back and forth. But I would like to share it. I'm sharing it because I think it's good for anybody, especially if you're a new tenure track professor, or me. And you know, we can help implement those changes. I'll share it at faculty forum and our faculty development days. Next year, I hope to provide the outcomes, maybe a poster earlier in the day. And manuscript, like Robin said, we can submit to a quality improvement journal, and it will help get that tenure track file monkey off my back if I get a publication out of it as well. So I would really, you know, I'm hoping that. So our status.
So the status, there you go. So what has been accomplished so far? The proposal has been developed, as you can see. The hiring of an RA, although it does research assistant doesn't really apply here.
I had to hire a
project
grade for testing.
Yes.
That's part of the funding,
Yeah, which is a great opportunity for a student. And then the transfer of the survey, as we said, has already been done to Qualtrics. We've got the QR code, all of the recruitment material has been generated. The required approvals, that was the biggest hurdle to overcome, but HREB approval was not required. However, with its submission to HREB was required for them to determine that, yes, we agree this is a quality improvement project. And that's the exemption letter that would be submitted to any journal to say, yes, we've got the approval that yes, this was indeed a quality improvement project. So the only approval that we did require at that stage was the executive committee faculty.
just so it's not a onerous task on students, like just not something extra for them to do.
Yes. So remaining is the invitation to participate that will go out. Data collection and analysis, dissemination of findings, and most importantly, the change implementation. And so after that, in quality improvement projects, the last part is always forgotten, the evaluation of that change. And so that's the last.
So the outcomes we might, and the evaluation, we'll probably be able to do that next year.
Yeah.
So that's it.
Thank you so much.
Thanks for staying.
Yeah.
Any questions? Anybody want a copy of the A6 to give out?
Question, but I'd be very interested in seeing the results.
Yeah.
Because that is an interesting thing for us, especially because we do a lot of work with the satellite sites
Yeah.
with the instructors. So I'd be very interested in hearing results.
Yeah, there are some challenges with the satellite sites, I find. Like it's really hard to engage. Like it's easy to engage somebody in a classroom. I can pick out who's sleeping and I can pick on them and wake them up, you know? But with the satellite sites, you got to be a little bit more animated, a little bit more innovative. You got to kind of put it back on the students. I often joke that I don't teach anything. I actually just go in and ask questions until they come up with the right answer, right? So I go in, I say, what do you think about that? What do you think about that? And then they end up talking about it and they come up with, I don't know, cellular metabolism. And it's right. So, yeah, so I'm hoping that maybe I can get some new ideas.
But in terms of that motivation, that self-motivation, I think it's a really nice link because we find nursing students, they're extremely motivated. They, no one goes into nursing for nothing, right? They are very motivated to do so. And the grades just to get into nursing are quite high. So these are people who already have a competence level and are motivated. So what is the remaining factor that needs to be addressed? So it's kind of exciting to be able to tackle that one. Yeah. Thank you so much.
Thank you.